Raising the Bets is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to Raising the Bets. We're a Catholic couple raising 5 kids outside of Boston. Join us as we share the joys and challenges of marriage, homeschool, and our adventures near and far as we make sense of the world and experience the best parts of our culture. I'm Don Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
That pause in there at the beginning kind of sounded like I wasn't sure where we were. I had the wrong breath. You know, when you're reading something out loud and you just start with the wrong breath and you run out before the end. It sounds like there's a comma in the clause, but there isn't. Anyway.
Sure.
So, let's talk about what we've been doing. What have you been doing, Melanie? Tell me all about it. Just kidding. So,
okay.
The kids went camping this weekend.
The 4 big scouts went camping.
They went in December in a cabin. Let's not go crazy here. They didn't go outside in a tent. They were in a cabin.
Although scouts do that.
We have done that. We did that in February a few years ago. If you go back and listen to that episode, it was 19 degrees that night. I slept in a tent. I'm glad I can say that now.
You lived to tell the tale.
I lived to tell the tale. I was not happy doing it. It was the longest night ever. So, but these guys, they went camping, and it was the annual Campsgiving. I guess it technically wasn't Campsgiving because it wasn't Thanksgiving weekend but it was a couple weeks after. So it's.
But why would that not count?
I don't know. I think, well, maybe I'm making up rules and regulations for what counts as Campsgiving. But it's a tradition in Scouts where they go and camping and they cook a Thanksgiving dinner outdoors. This was not quite all cooked outdoors. In fact, a lot of it was the families made the side dishes and sent them along with the kids to be reheated in the oven at the cabin that they were staying in. But they did make turkeys there.
You know, as long as some things were cooked out of doors, I would not quibble.
Yeah. I think they smoked one turkey. I don't think they deep fried any.
They have in the past, though.
Yeah. They've done garbage can turkey where they put it under a clean garbage can, like a new garbage can, and pile coals around it so it makes like an oven, that sort of thing. So they've done it in various ways in the past. They've deep fried them and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I don't know how they did it. I have to ask how they did it. I couldn't go this time because I had recordings on Saturday, and so I couldn't get out of it. But that's okay because they were fine. We took them there. It was at Knobscott Reservation, which is about 45 minutes from our house. So I drove them up there Friday and then got out very early Sunday morning to drive up and pick them up. But in between, it was you, me, and Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
It was very quiet.
Yes, poor Lucy. She was distressed at how quiet it was and how.
Yes.
There were no siblings to entertain her. She is, as the youngest of 5, she is just not used to not being entertained.
Right. I know we've talked about that before when we've gone camping without her, and she's here alone with just you and her. She's just rattling around in the big house. But, so after I was done recording on Saturday, we had lunch, and I was like, it's early. We should run over to Ikea. And because we had some things we needed to get still. A year later, so it's been a year since we moved back into the house after the disaster, and we were still had boxes in the living room because we needed another bookcase in the living room to unload onto. Somehow, we ended up with needing more shelf space.
There was lots of stuff that was on the floor before we moved out.
Yeah, I guess so. So we needed another bookcase to clear out those boxes and move things around. So we got another Billy bookcase, and we got a desk for the boys' room. That is just dedicated Lego desk. That's essentially what it is right now. Right. In the future, it may be something different, but because Ben's got this puzzle board, it's like 2 feet by 3 feet. That is his Lego puzzle board that he and Lucy use. It's just covered in Legos. and it has been living in the living room.
Yeah, he wouldn't take it back to his bedroom.
Yeah, well, he has no place to put it. It would have to be on the floor, and and then you get kicked and knocked over, and so we went and got this desk. It fits the puzzle board. You can put the bins underneath. We got a couple little sorting bins for the Lego, so it's nice. We were a little concerned how he would feel about it when he got back, but he was happy. He liked it.
Yeah. Anthony wasn't quite so sure. He's taking some time to get. He doesn't like new things.
He doesn't like change. He is set in his ways like an old man. But you also cleaned their room. Like
I did. I picked up all the Legos on the floor, and it was a sea of Legos, and all the dirty clothes that hadn't made it into the laundry, and all the dirty tissues and granola bar wrappers, and it's a boys' room.
A boys' room. Did you clean out under the bed?
I did not, but actually, under the bed was relatively clean because one of them had cleaned it not that long ago.
Because I did notice that when Anthony was looking for his Kindle, he had to dive under the bed because it had fallen down the side, on the far side of it.
I did not clean under the bed.
Okay. So we did that, and these things went together relatively easy. I mean, as far as having to assemble IKEA stuff, like the desk was pretty easy.
Yeah.
And the little chairs that it came with. The Billy was a little more work, especially it's the fastening it to the wall that is the pain. But so I did that. I'm not so sure about the fasteners. I may end up getting heavier duty wall bolts.
Yeah, although we no longer have children who are like trying to climb the furniture.
Yeah, that's true. This is true. It should be fine. I'm fairly certain that it's not going anywhere. Fairly. I just don't want to hear a crash in the middle of the night. That would be the worst. So we did that, and then after we walked around IKEA. IKEA is it's a people watching place, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It is so not every place has an IKEA, and so we have the only IKEA in New England in the next town over, and there are people there from all over the world, like literally. You can hear a dozen languages as you walk through the maze. It is amazing. No pun intended.
Uh-huh.
So that's always a little bit of fun. So we went through there. We did the 5 labors of IKEA, which is walking the maze, finding your stuff in the warehouse, getting through the checkout, getting the stuff into your car, and then when you get home, assembling it. Those are the 5 labors of IKEA.
Yeah, the checkout was the most stressful bit. I took Lucy to get a snack, and the soda machines didn't have ice, so they wouldn't sell us soda.
Right.
She would have drunk a warm soda gladly,
but they wouldn't sell it to you.
But they wouldn't sell it to us. So we ended up getting ices finally after a long negotiation.
Worst ice cream headache of my life. It was the worst. It was so bad. Like I was driving and I've got this ice cream headache. My eyeball was literally aching. It was so painful. I was trying to suck it down quick because I was I wanted to get rid of the cup so I could concentrate on driving. Don't do that, folks. Oh no. Man. So then we went to on the way home. We decided to stop to get pho at our favorite Vietnamese place. It's Lucy's favorite, so we promised her that would be her compensation for being stuck at home with us. And I mean, tough life for us. So we go to the place, and I love pho. I really do. And it's almost to my detriment because every time I can get it, that's what I order. And there's so much other good stuff on the menu.
Yeah, I like exploring the rest of the menu.
I know.
Although I've kind of settled on the shrimp cake and the
pork chop
and crusty bean wrap is my favorite thing.
Oh yeah, well over the rice bowl thing.
Yeah, sometimes I get it. Sometimes I get the rice. Sometimes I get the vermicelli bowl. They have different options depending on like they don't have the same selections of meats in the vermicelli bowls versus
the combinations.
The combinations are different.
It's kind of weird that the combinations are different. That they don't want it. Because you like the shrimp cake, the pork chop, and the bean curd.
Yeah,
the crispy bean curd. Yeah, but they only had that combination with the rice, not with the noodle. I wonder if you
No. They had a
Oh, the only two of them.
Yeah, I didn't actually get the combination of meats that I wanted because I really wanted rice, not noodles. The other way around.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
It was good though. I like it.
Okay. Yeah. It was good. You let me say something. It was really, really tasty.
Yeah, the pork chop was grilled to perfection, very thin sliced, and then
with the sweet sauce, like a sweet savory sauce.
Yeah, then the shrimp cake is so good. Oh, yeah. I just love it.
Yeah,
it's like shrimp that's made into a paste and then made flat, and then they put like it in a wrapper of like
rice
bean
wrapper,
a bean wrapper, and then fry it. And it's like crunchy, and oh, it's so good.
Yeah, it's really good. If you ever get a chance to try it out. So we did that, and then then today I got up early and drove 45 minutes to go grab them, and they were pretty tired.
They were very tired. I thought that it would take a miracle to get them all to mass, and we had a miracle, folks, because all 5 kids managed to go to mass, and I don't even know how that happened because Sophie was in the shower at like
at quarter till,
and
we had to leave. Mass is at 10:30. We have to leave the house by 10:10.
Yeah. And Bella hadn't got into the shower yet. And Bella said she absolutely refused to go to mass unless she could shower first. And I'm thinking there's no way. But
yeah, Ben was like rolled up in his blanket.
Ben was like in his bed wanting to go back to sleep. And I'm like, no, you have to get up and go to church.
But we all made it, which is good. I'm not sure how awake everyone was, but we were all there.
You know, I figure that God understands if you're nodding off.
Yeah, you're making the effort. So
I've been nodding off so many times in my life.
Yeah, well, the parenting thing. There's a season in parenting where you're basically going through life half awake anyway. So
yeah, you're like The Walking Dead, really.
Yeah, I'm surprised the society functions.
It's amazing.
So so that's what's been going on, and we got a big week coming up. Though you and the 3 older girls.
2 older girls.
There were only 3 girls. You and the 2 older girls are headed out of town.
Yeah, we're heading to Austin, my native city, because my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, is having a baby shower. And
first baby that isn't you, from you.
This is the first baby on my side of the family that isn't one of ours. So super excited to hang out with my sister-in-law and do family stuff and hopefully get some good Tex-Mex while we're there.
It's been 5 years, right? I think we mentioned
it's been 5 years.
Yeah. So, and I'll be here with the 3 young ones. We'll be good. We'll have fun. I told them that we would go to barbecue and Tex-Mex here, which won't be as good, but we won't feel as bad. I don't think Lucy was so thrilled with that idea.
I don't think Lucy really cares that much about the food.
She does.
Lucy is a little bit in despair about spending the entire weekend with a house full of boys.
Well, first she's like upset because she's by herself, and now she's gonna have the 2 brothers. But yeah, whatever. She'll survive. She'll be staying with the fun parent, so she'll have a good time.
The fun parent.
It's gonna be ice cream and movies and unlimited screen time.
Okay. You do you.
No, they will not. It will not be that. So let's talk about, speaking of food, some food we've been making this week.
Or you've been making.
I've been making. I've been doing a lot of the cooking. So tonight I made baked ziti. I had seen, for a long time I've been wanting to make baked ziti. I like baked pasta. And apparently I was under the misapprehension that Melanie did not like baked pastas.
I have no idea where this apprehension came from. I did not ever tell you that I don't.
I must have slipped between alternate dimensions.
Something like that.
So I saw there's this great YouTube channel, the Orsara recipes. I must have talked about it once before, but it's this guy. Oh, what is his name? He's an old Italian guy, and let's see. Let me look it up. Orsara. I got to get his name. Pasquale Scarappa, and he's like off the boat from the city of Orsara in Italy, and so he makes these recipes, like all these great Italian recipes. And he was making this pasta al forno, which is baked ziti, And I'm like, I really want to make that. So that's what I made. That. So it's really nice. It's really fun and easy. It's like lasagna without the fiddliness, like having to lay the layers. So it's pretty straightforward. You get a pound of ziti, so you cook that up, and I'm just getting it up right now, the recipe, and just so I want to make sure I have the right, saying the right thing here. So you make a meat sauce. So you take some. I took some sausages. He doesn't have sausages. He uses pork and beef, but I use like Italian sausage. I use sweet Italian sausage. I slice them open. The casing. You take them out of the casing, and I put them in the Dutch oven with a little bit of drizzle of olive oil, and then I cooked it, crumbling it up with the edge of a spatula, of a wooden spoon or a spatula, whatever, and let that cook so that it's not browned anymore. Then you add in some tomato paste. I use tablespoon or so of tomato paste. Mix that in. Then you add in garlic and onion. Let it cook for a few minutes. Then you take a whole cup of wine. Now he called for white wine, like a dry white. We didn't have any dry white wine right now, so I just used red. I think it worked fine. In fact, I might actually like it a little better. So I
usually use red wine and red sauce.
Yeah. So I threw in and then you let it cook for like 4 minutes. You're really evaporating out all the alcohol, and it's kind of cooking down. And then you add in, I use crushed tomatoes, a can of crushed tomatoes, and then salt and pepper. I added some basil, some fresh thyme that we had in the fridge. I think that was it. For herbs and things, and then you just let it simmer. He was like, "Oh, simmer for an hour." I didn't have an hour, but I let it simmer while I started getting everything else together. So I get the water to boil to cook the pasta. I preheat the oven to 400, and then I have some ricotta. So I have a tub of ricotta. It was like 15 ounces. Couple cups of mozzarella, shredded mozzarella. I just had the bag stuff, and then I grated up some Parmigiano Reggiano. He had called for Grana Padano, but it's the same thing. So you take half of that, you set it aside. You take the other half, all of the ricotta and half of the grated cheeses. Put it that way. You take that and you add in an egg and some parsley, and you mix them up, and then you add some of the meat sauce to it, and you mix it up, and then you set some of it aside, some of that aside. So you got a couple bowls of set aside stuff. And you take the cooked ziti, you throw it in the bowl, with the big bowl, mix it together. You put a little sauce at the bottom of a 13x9. You put half of the ziti in the pan. Then you add sauce, a layer of the grated cheeses, half of the stuff you'd set aside, and then the rest of the ziti, more sauce, rest of the grated cheeses, the rest of the ricotta mix that you'd set aside, and then you bake it, and then you put more grated cheeses on top. I'll link to the recipe. You'll see his method. In any case, it's really good. Everybody liked it except for Lucy, who doesn't really like pasta sauces and pastas and sauce.
She really doesn't.
But Ben liked it, and Ben usually doesn't like pasta sauce. Everybody else pretty much enjoyed it. Yeah, the most of it was gone. You didn't get a chance to eat it because you're developing a tomato allergy.
Yeah, it's lovely. I
Great.
love
it. Thanks for that. It's not like we eat tomatoes a lot in this house. So that was good. I was happy with that one. That we will definitely be making that again. And then the other one was a soup that I wanted to make, a slow cooker white bean and tomato soup. This is the advantage of this one is slow cooker. So I started this one just after lunch, and you take some carrot, onion, fennel, which is one of the key ingredients in this, some garlic, salt, and pepper. You cook it in a skillet till it starts to brown. Then you add in some cannellini beans, canned cannellini beans, broth. This all goes in the slow cooker once it's sauteed. Then you add the beans, chicken broth, crushed tomatoes, thyme. This is why I had thyme, salt, and then I added sliced sausages, sliced Italian sausage. because I wanted to add a little more flavor and meat and substance to it, and then cook it on high, on high for 4 hours or 6 hours on low. You know how most slow cookers are, it's like 4, 6, 8, or 10. So, and 4 and 6 are high, and 8 and 10 are, 4 and 6 are low, 8 and 10 are other way around.
Yeah.
4 hours.
Longer is lower.
That's right.
Shorter is higher.
Yep. In any case, I did it for the 6 hour one. And then at the end of it, you take some Kalamata olives, they chopped up, some ground fennel, some pepper flakes, and parsley, and olive oil, and you microwave. You chopped it all together. You microwave it. You heat it up, and what you're making is a drizzle sauce that you'll drizzle onto the bowl at the table, which was really kind of good. Now you added at the end, once the soup was done. One of the things you do when the soup is done is you take out a couple of cups of it and put it in a blender and blend it up. And because of the beans, it thickens up the soup really well. So we need to we had to do that. But then you thought about throwing some kale. We had some kale, throwing that in there, which I would have cooked longer, but it was okay.
Oh, I like the kale only
Fresh?
slightly cooked.
Okay. Yeah. So we threw it in at the end.
Chewy.
So a little extra kale and sausage were added to it. Now, because you can't have tomatoes, what I ended up doing was I cooked it for a while, like for 3 hours without the tomatoes in it. And then I pulled out enough for your dinner of that soup without the tomatoes, and then added tomatoes and let it cook for another 2 hours. So I did end up doing it for 6 hours instead of 4. But that way you could have something. What did you think of the tomato-less one?
It was really good. Honestly, I kind of wish you'd set aside more, because I would have eaten it.
Yeah.
I mean, I really like the cannellini brothy soups. And I actually think even if I had been able to eat the tomatoes, I think I would prefer it without tomatoes, honestly.
Interesting. I mean, I really love a good tomato soup. There was a lot of leftovers. Most of the kids didn't really love the tomato soup, which is the downside. But I ended up eating the leftovers. I just finished them off today for lunch, and making it grilled cheese to go with it. So I get grilled cheese sandwich and a tomato soup. But yeah, I mean, next time I could try doing this without tomatoes and see if if kids like it any better. I really like the drizzle thing, the Kalamata fennel drizzle. I think it was a nice touch. So
I mean, to be honest, I think that you probably lose most of the kids at the beans, but you could try.
Right.
Lucy did like it better without the tomatoes, and I think Bella would have liked it better without the tomatoes. So
yeah, Bella, actually, I think she did say she liked it with she tried yours and liked it without the tomatoes.
She's not a huge tomato person.
Sophie doesn't really like soups, and Anthony and Ben, well, they picked through the things anyway. So, all right, so that's what we've been cooking. One that was a big hit, another one not as much of a hit, but I think was still pretty good. So, I'll put links to those in the show notes. So let's talk about what we've been reading and watching. I finished watching the first season of The Peripheral on Amazon Prime. This was a adaptation of a cyberpunk novel by I forget who, but it was pretty good. It was a little mind bendy. It's because it has to do with time travel and branching timelines and what happens if you branch off, and so there's a little bit of like and this is kind of like a reboot thing that happens at some point, and I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm buying it. There's also an annoying the semi-obligatory these days annoying non-traditional gender character. It's a dude dressed up as a woman that we're supposed to think is a woman, and it was like as soon as I saw this, I knew right away it was, it was this kind of character. So it's kind of annoying to have that kind of shoved in there. It felt awkward. Like we're intentionally throwing this thing in there. So I didn't like that, but it's violent, and profane. There's a lot of bad language. In fact, one of the episode titles is basically 2 curse words, phrases. So, but it was interesting. One of the premises is that it takes place in 2 different times, in like 2030 and 2070, or the end of the century or something like that. But in the 2030 timeline, there was a Texas secession rebellion, apparently, where they had to go fight against those Texans who rebelled, those disloyal Texans. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. Then but it's pretty good. I'm looking forward to season 2 because there's an interesting story that's developed there. And then we watched with the kids Ms. Marvel episode 4,
which is, I think, the best episode.
Yeah, this is the one where we see a flashback to the events of the partition of India and Pakistan, and Kamala Khan's family. Her great grandmother and great grandfather and grandmother, and that stuff was really good.
I really loved also this got into the relationships between mothers and daughters, between Kamala and her mom and her mother and her grandmother. And there was this really nice parallelism, and it really felt like it was about the women of the family coming together and reconciling these relationships, which were rocky. And like Kamala's relationship with her mom was being affected by her mom's relationship with her mother.
Right. This is the point at which Kamala's mom stops being a stereotypical immigrant mother who's overprotective and helicopter parenting to, she's this way because of this specific situation, and now she's overcoming that, and the mom becomes likable at this point. I mean, the mom was kind of likable before, but she becomes much more likable at this point.
Yes. I mean, I think that actually this episode makes Muniba one of my favorite characters.
Yes.
She becomes this really great mom who's willing to say, I'm sorry, I've made some mistakes, both to her mom and to her daughter. I mean, that's really like a great character turning point.
She feels like a real mom.
She really does feel like a real mom. I really, she's not perfect, but she loves her family, and she's doing the best she can. And I love her Bon Jovi obsession.
Yeah.
It makes her so human. And she, talks about like her life as a young person, and, Kamala getting to see glam pictures of her mom from the 80s. And
there comes a point in life, usually for me, it was I think in my 20s, when you start hearing your parents' stories, the crazy things they did, the stuff that they would never want you to know when you were in that stage of life that they did.
Yeah. And I really think, that's one of the things that the show does well, is it does family well. And I really like Kamala as a person who is part of a family.
Right.
I think that's the theme that they really develop well in this show.
It may be the best family situation of any of the Marvel stories. I'm trying to think of if there's any, like, she's got a mom and a dad at home in a normal situation. They're married and they're in a loving relationship, and
then her brother and his
fiance, his wife, and they are friends they are normal brother and sister. They have their scrappiness, but they're still care for each other. I mean, it is a normal family, and you don't see a lot of those in MCU. There's a lot of loving relationships with, like, Ant-Man with his daughter, but there's a divorce in there, so it's a broken relationship. There's a lot of these weird, unusual situations, shall we say. But in this one, it is a regular nuclear family, and it's good. I like that. The other thing I was going to say is, the thing about this series is there's no one who's been chosen for a role because they're eye candy. You know what I mean? Too often, don't get me wrong. These are attractive people. They're good. They're conventionally good looking people, but they're not like chosen because they will be attractive to a certain demographic of male or female audience and that sort of thing. I mean, Chris Hemsworth is a handsome man, and part of the reason he's there is because he's Beefcake, or Scarlett Johansson. I mean, they're fine actors, but they're partly chosen for their looks. And I feel like the people who are in these roles, whether it's Kamala or the mom or the dad or any of these roles, perhaps the most attractive person would be the Aisha character, like the great grandmother. Like, feel like most of them are just chosen because they're good actors and they're good in the role. So I kind of like that. I think it makes a good impression on the kids as they watch it. They're seeing people who are more like them and not just these unattainable characters. So it was good. I like it. And not played for comic, like Spider-Man's sidekick is, he's heavy. Ned. And so he's often, because he's heavy, he's played for comedy. This sort of trope in TV and movies. It's the heavy kid is the funny guy. Funny things happen to him. He's the comic relief. And I don't feel like it's that way in this one. So they've done a good job with this. So as far as reading things, I finished another of the Murderbot Diaries novellas called Rogue Protocol. So I think that's the third one, I think.
Yeah.
And we were just talking earlier, and we both agreed, I think it's the weakest of the series. Yeah, it's sort of conventional, I think is the way I'd say it. There's nothing that makes it stand out. Like the original Murderbot story was different. The tone was different. The personality was different. It was a different point of view, and it was kind of compelling because of it. This one was a much more conventional sci-fi story. I think that this one just maybe suffers from the middle book in the series. I mean, it's not exactly the middle because it's a series of novellas and it's more than just 3 books, but right.
It kind of feels like the middle thing where we need to get from point A to point B, and this is the way we get there, but the journey itself wasn't as compelling to me. There's
a couple of things that are useful for the story overall, like we're advancing the overall plot of Murderbot's origins.
But the specific story, like what Murderbot is like attempting to do here, it didn't grab me.
Yeah, I'd agree. The author, I think she's trying to expand the universe a little bit, that the character lives in. But you're right. Like it didn't. And none of the minor characters in this one also. Like in the second one, we meet the research ship with the research transport, which has a great personality, and they have a really good interaction. And I feel like Murderbot spends a lot of this book. Actually, maybe this is kind of key. Murderbot spends a lot of this book pretending to be human. Yeah.
And not terribly successfully, but also keeping everyone at a distance. Like there's no real relationships that are formed here because Murderbot is just on a mission, trying to accomplish a goal, interacting with people while not being itself, and nobody knows that it's a construct. And I think that maybe that lessens the dramatic tension because there isn't that. What makes Murderbot great is sort of watching it interact with other people, either other robots or people who know it's not human.
Although in the second one, there was a group of people who thought it was human, but it was different there because it was a different kind of situation. It was still close to the people, even as it was trying to. Whereas in this one, it was holding people at arm's length. Yeah, it really did not get close to any of the people it was working with. I think that was really key. I think the big thing in this one was there was yet another AI, another artificial person, another robot that was very different from Murderbot and had related to people very differently. And I think that was maybe intended to sort of, it was also very different from the research ship in the second book, and therefore almost the exact opposite. And therefore it was trying to provide a contrast. I don't think it worked though. I mean, I think, right.
like the ideas are interesting, and I do see that like in the context of the overall series, that robot character moves Murderbot like forward.
Mm-hmm.
But as a story, it just didn't grab me as much.
Right. But I'm looking forward to continue to read. I've picked up some other books now. There's a book called Travels with George by Nathaniel Philbrick. This is a nonfiction book, and I'm in the process of reading that now, where he's personally following along on the journey that George Washington took when he first became president. Washington toured the colonies. Thus, we have all of those George Washington slept here stories. Washington famously toured the colonies.
I don't think I knew that. I mean, I knew that the George Washington slept here thing, but I didn't really know why.
Yeah, and so he took several trips, and so the author, Philbrick, he and his wife and their dog are journeying along the same places, going to the same places. So it's a little bit of a history book. It's a little bit of a travel memoir. So I'm not very far into it. It's just at the beginning. And he's wrestling throughout it. He's kind of wrestling with the man and the myth of George Washington in this idea of, is he the great father of our nation? Well, of course, but how do we reconcile that also with slave ownership? And even like he points out like his slave ownership is complicated, and it's he's a human being. So there's a lot of different things going on. And so he was for abolition. He was against slavery, and yet he owned his slaves. Yet he freed them when he died, but he only freed them when he died instead of, so there's this whole complex look at this man. So I'm curious. I've liked Philbrick's other books, so I'm looking forward to reading this one. But I kind of taken a bit of a detour having started that, because I found out that Jim Butcher, the author of the Dresden Files, had a short story that neither you or I had read.
It came out like earlier this year, like back in March or April.
Yeah, like March, April, May. It's a compilation of short stories called Heroic Hearts, and the story itself is called Little Things. And we were talking about this. One of the things we like about Butcher's short stories is he almost always takes minor characters from the main novels, the 14 main novels so far, and expands on them and gives them the focus. Really fleshes out the world.
He also fleshes out the characters themselves. Like they become less flat, more rounded people, like seeing from their point of view. But I also think that one of the things that they do is they let us see our protagonist, Harry Dresden, from another point of view, because the novels are first person narrative. We're always inside Harry's head.
Right.
And the short stories are a way of triangulating, and we see Harry as other people see him.
True.
And it's the only time we see him as other people see him.
And Harry, like all of us, lies to himself at times or omits things in his first person narrative. Right.
And so this novel is, or this short story rather, is told from the point of view of Harry's fairy minion, General Toot Toot.
Toot Toot.
Which is a silly, irreverent name which Harry bestowed on this character, who was very comic relief when he first shows up.
He shows up in the, I think we're saying the first novel.
I think it's in the first book.
Very early in the first novel even. And he was he was a comic relief kind of throwaway character.
It's just like Harry needs some information, and so the Deus Ex Machina by which he gets some information is he calls on the fairies and he pays them in pizza.
Right. They love pizza, the fairy.
But the fairies over the course of the novels become Dresden's Baker Street irregulars.
Yeah.
What the Baker Street irregulars are to Sherlock Holmes, these fairy characters are. They're small and not very powerful and inconspicuous, and everybody underestimates them because they're little.
Yeah, Toot Toot sees himself as the captain of the guard of the Za Lord. Harry is the pizza lord, the Za Lord. Yes.
Toot Toot's language is very primitive, and he doesn't always understand English well. He gets words wrong. Like in this short story, Harry is worried about the economy, which Tutu renders as
Economy. The great monster, the economy that we have to fight. Harry's very worried about it because Harry, the wizard, fights monsters, and if Harry's worried about something, it must be a monster. So, and this is a great little short story that kind of fleshes out that character, fleshes out a little bit of what we know about Harry and what's going on with him at this stage of the story, of the overall story.
When this is also, since the last novel, we've had a couple of short stories that fill in some of the gaps of like what happened at the end of the novel. And so this is another of those, like, what happened after the big battle of Battleground.
Right. There's another short story that I want to check out in another collection coming out next year, next March. It's an anthology called Instinct and Animal Rescues Anthology. And this one features Mouse, which is Harry's
dog.
It's a Tibetan temple dog, which they're a real thing. If you look them up online, they're these massive fluff balls.
I think it's called a Tibetan Mastiff.
Tibetan Mastiff, right. And Mouse is very intelligent, like human intelligent. And apparently in the story, he teams up with Cerberus, the Hound of Hell, because something has escaped from hell. And Cerberus is supposed to guard the gates of hell to make sure nothing escapes. So I'm sure that's going to be an interesting, fun story to read. So, and then you said you finished a book, The Great Passage.
Yeah, I've been reading lots of like bits and pieces of books all over the place. It's one of those weeks, but I did finish one novel called The Great Passage by Shion Miura, who's a Japanese author. It's a book written in Japanese and translated into English. And I read one of her books this summer about a young man who goes to become a forester in Kamasura. I can never remember the name. Anyway, The Great Passage is a story about dictionaries and the people who make them. And so we start off with one character who is trying to, he has a dream, an ambition of creating a new Japanese dictionary. And it's going to be called The Great Passage because a dictionary takes you on a journey through over the sea of words. And a lot of the dictionaries that they're mentioned, because it talks about other dictionaries too. A lot of the dictionaries have these great imaginative titles. They sound more like novels than dictionaries. And I don't know if this is a peculiarity of Japanese culture. It's interesting because it's a novel that's very much about words, but it's been translated. And so sometimes the translator, when the meanings of the Japanese and English words are similar enough, just uses the English equivalent. Like when they're talking about the definition of dog,
right?
For example, evidently there's enough cultural similarities in terms of not only what a dog is, but how they think about dogs as being loyal and companions and that sort of thing, that it translated well. There's quite a few places where they're talking about the word and they're using the Japanese word or phrase because there is no English equivalent. It's got a romance in it. It's kind of a light novel. It's not a heavy novel. But one of the characters is a very geeky guy who's working in the advertising wing of the publishing company, and he gets pulled in to work on this dictionary. And the dictionaries department kind of has this very low guy on the totem pole in the publishing company because dictionaries cost a lot to make.
They probably don't sell a lot.
And don't sell that much.
Right.
But they're kind of prestigious too. So every publishing company wants to have a prestigious dictionary.
Right.
But during the course of the novel, they end up working on all of these other projects, like a sort of special dictionary for like a video game with the vocabulary for that world. Kind of like the Harry Potter books that like take you through the Potterverse sort of book.
Right.
You get the feeling of, and some like student dictionaries and other these like niche projects that the publishing company wants done more. And so through the course of the novel, the main character falls in love, writes a painfully long 15-page love letter to the girl he's in love with. You have several side characters whose point of view you see him through. And the course of the novel takes place over like more than a decade. Like he goes from the newbie in the department to being the head of the department. And one of the characters who's been working on this dictionary, and it's his lifelong project, gets sick and goes into the hospital. And there's this like sort of push of, are we going to be able to get the dictionary done before he dies? And there was a lot of really great human moments. And then we see another new person come into the department who doesn't really know anything about dictionaries or care, but then comes to be passionate about the project. There are some moments which feel very Japanese in terms of the company culture, the group culture. At one point, they realize that a mistake has been made and an important word has been left out of the dictionary when they're reading through the galley proofs. Oh. The word for blood is not there. And like, you can't, it would be bring shame to us if this was published without like this very important word. So then they have to go through and read through the entire dictionary and check to make sure every word on their cards is in the galley proofs. Oh. And so they get this army of college students who come in and work, like they're camping in the office for weeks. Nobody goes home. They're doing coin-op laundry and eating in the office while they're working on this dictionary day and night. And I just can't imagine that happening in an American company, in an American context. It feels very Japanese to me.
Huh.
And there's a great, like, there's a lot about food because the love interest is a chef. And so you have two people who are very passionate about very different things. The guy who's passionate about words and dictionaries and the woman who is passionate about food and cooking. And they make a nice pairing and contrast. It was a fun book. I really, really, really liked it. And as a person who loves words and loves, precisions of words and the poetry of words, I liked the idea of like, what we're putting in this dictionary, can change lives. It makes a difference. And the words we use matter and how we define them matters.
I like that the title is a kind of a pun, a play on words, because, the great passage is, it's a dictionary is a boat that carries across the sea of words. So a journey, there's a kind of a journey in the novel, as you mentioned, that they could journey to complete the dictionary. But great passage is also something like a passage is a section of a story.
Oh, right. So trying to find the perfect section of the story to illustrate each word.
Right. Or the story itself is a great passage, like a great part of a bigger story. We're seeing a subsection of the entire journey of the dictionary.
Yeah.
So I kind of like the connotations there. As we were preparing for the show, we were looking on Amazon, and it turns out there's there's an anime that was made based on the Great Passage,
which I am now determined I must watch.
Yes, this will be a future review on this show. We'll talk about that. It's kind of fun. It came out in 2016, which was before the
book was translated into
English.
Book was
translated into English.
I wonder if the fact that this book has moved from book to anime might have pushed it higher in the list of books to translate into English.
Well, plus you had the translation issues that you were talking about, which the challenges as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I love books that take me on a journey into other places, other cultures that are completely different from mine, and yet seeing those similarities, that the passions are the same, even if the culture is different. The people are people.
People are people. Yeah. Cool. So that's called the Great Passage. Yeah.
And word nerds are word nerds, no matter what culture they're from.
So just to bring us to a head this week, to the high point of the show, we want to talk about the readings for the second Sunday of Advent. Just as a refresher, the first reading was from Isaiah 11. Talks about the shoot that shall sprout from the stump of Jesse. And we have a gospel reading that's about John the Baptist crying out in the desert. This is the John the Baptist enters the picture. John the Baptist has entered the chat.
Uh-huh.
But prepare a voice of one crying out in the desert, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight his paths. It's interesting. So what was Father Oliver?
I don't remember.
Not one of the usual priests, but he's one of the African priests that help out at our parish. And he was focused a lot on the first reading and talks about the Jewish idea, the Old Testament idea of the Messiah, what with the Jewish people who, John the Baptist was speaking to, what they were expecting in a Messiah, and they were expecting a king. They were looking for an earthly ruler who was going to be like David or Saul, who, a king chosen by God to lead the people.
Right. And one of the things I liked that Father pointed out, which I don't think I've heard anyone say so explicitly, is Saul was the first Messiah.
Yeah.
Like literally Messiah means anointed king. And so in the culture, Messiah didn't mean only future king, only some future savior. It meant it was something we've had before in the past and will have again in the future.
Right.
So
in Judaism, there's multiple messiahs. Yeah.
Right. So Messiah isn't a one and only one time deal. Saul was a Messiah. David was a Messiah. Solomon was a Messiah.
Right. Even today, you'll hear Jews who talk about the various messiahs throughout, the last few thousand years, even in recent centuries, that guy was a Messiah. That guy was a Messiah. That sort of idea. They were anointed. They were sent. They had special roles.
Right. Whereas in Christianity, we've come to think of that term as being a sort of one and only. Jesus is the Messiah. But I think that maybe we lose, I feel like when he brought that up, I was like, yeah, that makes sense in terms of trying to understand how people in the first century reacted to Jesus and responded to him. What they were expecting was not what they got, was right. Not what we think of when we hear the word Messiah. Like our cultural baggage from the last 2,000 years of Christian history makes it hard for us to hear that word in the way that the users at the time would have understood the word.
Right.
Speaking of the importance of language.
Yes, language and meaning. So they were expecting a king, and so Father talked about when the king would come, he would bring absolute peace with him.
Right. This was the prophecy of Isaiah from the first reading. What does Isaiah paint as the prophesied king? What is the prophesied king supposed to do?
Right. He would come from the root of the stock of Jesse. So he was going to come from that family, from David's house. He would be a king of justice. And then he would bring the gifts of the Holy Spirit, like Isaiah's laying out here, the gifts of the Holy Spirit: wisdom, understanding, counsel, and strength, knowledge, and fear of the Lord. So we have these gifts of the Holy Spirit that are outlined for us here. And then Father talked about how the section about the animals that are normally opposed to each other.
Right, like the Messiah is bringing a sort of supernatural peace.
Yes.
Not just a peace in terms of like a cessation of warfare.
Right, an absence of war.
But a return to the peacefulness of the Garden of Eden, the peacefulness before the fall.
Yes.
When everything is in harmony. The entire universe, created world is in harmony.
Yeah, he had a special note for the verse where the baby shall play by the cobra's den, the child shall lay his hand on the adder's lair. And Father says, in Africa, fear of the snake is the beginning of wisdom. Like snakes in Africa, snakes are very, very bad.
Right. Well, the kids and I were just reading a list of the 10 most venomous snakes in the world. Mm-hmm. And several of them were in Africa and sounded quite scary.
Oh, yeah.
So the idea that the fear of the snake is the beginning of wisdom, he said, because if you don't fear the snake and you get bitten, you're dead and you can't become wise. you will not attain wisdom if you are bit by the snake.
Right. And you made a point about how Jesus, like that child, and
Well, the interesting thing is from the gospel today, John the Baptist is calling the Pharisees a brood of vipers, which is interesting when you put it next to Isaiah, where Isaiah says the child will put his hand in the mouth of the viper. And
right.
Here's John calling the Pharisees the brood of vipers. And here is Jesus, the prophesied child from Genesis, who he puts himself in the power of the Pharisees, of the brood of vipers.
Well, he certainly enters their lair.
Right. Well, but he lets himself be handed over to be killed by the vipers.
Right. And so the peace is not necessarily of the first reading is not necessarily a peace in the sense of nothing bad happens, but a peace maybe that whatever bad happens, good results. The ultimate good results.
Right. I mean, it's kind of, when we think about peace, I mean, that the prophecy about the peace of the Messiah will bring, this return to Eden, is one of the reasons, like when I was reading the gift of My Name is Asher Lev, actually last week, when he's talking about the Christian's understanding of the Messiah, one of the things that they kind of think about is like, well, look around at the world. Does it look like the Messiah has come yet?
Right.
Like, where's the kingdom of peace? Where are the lions lying down with the lambs? We still have wars and horrible wars. So where is I think that's a challenge for us to see, like, that peace is now and yet not now. It's here and yet in some sense we're still waiting for the perfect fulfillment of that prophecy.
There's also an element that where he talks about how the Pharisees and the Sadducees came to the baptisms that John was performing in the desert, in the Jordan, and he tells them, "You brood of vipers, who warned you to flee from the coming wrath?" And we get to sit here and go, "Yeah, you bad guys, who warned you guys to flee from the coming wrath?" And Father kind of turned around, challenged, like, are we that different from the Pharisees?
Well, Father basically said that if John the Baptist was here today, he would be saying the same things to us because we are the Pharisees.
In many ways, we are the Pharisees. Yeah, there's in the big ways you see in the news, it's hard to avoid. The church is, church's leaders, the church's people, often hypocritical, believing, we say we believe one thing and we do another, or we, reject our own church's teachings, the teachings of Jesus, that sort of stuff. But also even in personal ways with our own sinfulness. Are we Pharisees when we commit sin? Are we talking out of both sides of our mouth with our faith in Christ? Are we truly faithful? Are we trying to live that? Are we mouthing the platitudes to make ourselves feel better? This is a time. Advent is a great time to look at our hearts and reconcile with God and change. Metanoia was a word that Father was using. Metanoia is a 180-degree change to turn things around, and that's to change our hearts. And Advent is a great time to think about that and to do that. So,
and all of us need that change. It's not just those guys over there, but
right.
But it's us.
We
here.
all need a change.
Me.
Yeah, we all need to look at our hearts. I mean, we're the only ones. It's a great sport to tell other people how wrong they are, how sinful they are, especially to tell bishops how bad they are. A lot of people like to do that online these days, but really the one we should really be looking at is ourselves. How wrong am I? What do I need to change about myself? The great G.K. Chesterton quote, someone asked him, what's wrong with the church today? And
what's wrong with the world today?
What's wrong with the world today? Right. Me. I'm what's wrong with the world. And by saying that, what he's really saying is the only person I can really change is myself. And I'm no saint. I need to change myself.
But also, if everybody looked within themselves and changed themselves, then the world would be
a better place.
Yeah.
And the world would be a better place Boy.
Yeah, my brain went there too. I'm just not the one singing.
All right, we better end there before we get a takedown notice. So we like to take a moment now to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Raising the Bets, including Jude H., Salvatore P., Elisha R., Nash C., and Jimmy C. Their generous tax-deductible donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue Raising the Bets and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Follow Raising the Bets in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or at the StarQuest YouTube channel, where you should also make sure to hit the bell to get notifications. Until next time, I'm Dom Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
Thank you for listening to Raising the Bets on StarQuest. Hi everyone, this is Dom Bettinelli, CEO of StarQuest, with a special message as we approach the Christmas season. This past year, the StarQuest Network has continued to expand our mission of exploring the intersection of faith and pop culture through our many entertaining and informative programs. Now we need your generous financial support to reach new audiences with more of the life-changing and uplifting programming we've been creating for more than a decade. That's why it's very important that we hear from you this Advent and Christmas, the time when nonprofits receive most of their support for the year. If you are already a supporter of StarQuest, we thank you and ask you to prayerfully consider increasing your support at this time. If you're not yet a supporter, please become one now. Every gift counts. Could you give $15 or even just $10 per month? Whatever level of support you can offer, please show your support for SQPN this Christmas. And remember that your gifts may be tax deductible. Just go to sqpn.com/give. That's sqpn.com/give. May God bless you this Advent, and may you have a blessed Christmas season.